Hi there! Today we're going to take a look at the Tech21 DP3X dUg Pinnick signature preamp and see just how hard it can rock out. Let's go! The Tech21 DP3X is another one of their products made in their flyrig style. The idea here is to put everything you need into a small, lightweight and sturdy pedal that you can take with you wherever you're making. You won't need anything else than this and your instrument, and it really has some interesting sounds in it. I borrowed this pedal from a friend, so there are no sponsors today. Thanks, Benny. The DP3X has a tuner, a compressor, and two different channels. There's the normal channel, which is clean with little available distortion, and then there's the mix channel, which has all the distortion. These channels use the same 3-band EQ, but the mix channel also has extra controls. There's the drive and chunk control. All the potentiometers light up when they're active, which is a really nice touch, and it makes it quite handy on stage. These pedals don't have a cabinet simulation at the output per se, but there is some filtering going on at the output stage, which makes these pedals work just fine without a cabinet or another cabinet simulation. Since there's no actual cabinet simulation going on, you can still also run these into an amp and a cabinet if you want to. I recorded all the tone examples that you're going to hear straight into my audio interface, and there's very little processing after that, since that's pretty much how I feel these are meant to be used. The normal channel has a pretty vintage basic tone, but it can really be sculpted into many things using the 3-band EQ and the selectable middle frequency. The EQ here is really powerful and the middle frequency is very well thought out. You can use it to take you from a fat, thick, vintage bass tone into a very Sansamp-esque clank. Once we switch into the mix channel, we start getting into those very authentic dUg tones. This channel is deep, scooped and bright, and it has way more treble and distortion for pretty much anyone. What I find baffling about this channel is that pretty much everything it can do is the classic dUg tone. Your instinct might be to increase drive, to drive in some more mid-range saturation and fatness and compression, but nah. If you dial in more drive, your distortion only becomes harsher and the treble becomes more present, while the mid-range and the bass stay pretty much clean. If you dial in more chunk, your tone gets super bright and nasty pretty much immediately, even at low drive settings. The distortion character also feels quite weird. It's super grainy and blocky and, well, chunky. I guess the most prominent problem here is that the frequency range that the chunk is targeting is way too high. It's situated at a range that there is not that much information for a bass there. You have your pick scrapes and just the highest end of clank. A little bit less super high content and a little bit more of the high mid content at the distortion side would have made this pedal much more versatile. You can't even smooth out the frequency response by turning the chunk control down and then bringing the treble control up to bring back that high-end energy just a little bit, because the grainy character is still there, it's just lower volume. I find this channel really hard to accurately fit into a mix. It's simultaneously too processed and not compressed enough. The one thing it does, though, sounds pretty good. To be perfectly honest, I don't think that this pedal has 2 channels. I think it has maybe 1.5 channels, and that isn't because they share the same EQ, but mainly because I found it borderline impossible to use both of those channels at a live situation. The tones these channels offer are pretty much the polar opposite of each other. With the same EQ settings, the normal channel is quite dull and uninteresting and pretty mid-heavy, while the mix channel is super bright, bassy and aggressive. I can't think of a song or a situation that you could use both of these tones in live. Maybe if you're playing heavy metal with a jazzy Jaco style solo in the middle. Even then, I think it's a bit of a stretch. I would have loved to see a separate EQ for the mix channel, or maybe even just a few extra controls for the mix channel. That way you could actually balance out tones from both channels without having to sacrifice one or the other. Both channels have some really cool tones in them, but it's really disappointing to realize that you'll just have to choose one. If you've been paying attention so far, you'll realize that I haven't talked about the compressor. That's because I really don't want to. I hate it, and I hate that the device basically forces me to use it. The instant you turn up the compressor, you gain about a 10 decibel boost, and that kind of volume discrepancy between a non-compressed signal and a compressed signal makes it borderline impossible to dial in a good compression setting, because with us humans, louder is always better. It's also really aggressive from the get-go, and I don't think it has a setting that's mild. The way this pedal is designed means that Tech21 wants you to take your distortion tones from the mix channel. But what if I told you, come closer, but what if I told you that the normal channel also can distort? You see, when you use the volume and the 3-band EQ and the gain button to push the pedal as hard as you can, you start distorting the output section, and it gets freaky. This distortion is surprisingly flexible because at this point the 3-band EQ on the unit works as a pre-gain EQ. And if you don't already own a pre-gain EQ or a boost pedal that you use to shape your tones, get one. You can also use this same trick on the mix channel for an even more pronounced and aggressive distortion. These tones aren't really that giggable though, since you lose a lot of punch and dynamics because, well, you're essentially just hammering your tone against a brick wall limiter. And there's obviously no clean blend available. Also, to make this unit distort like this, you really need to drive the output hard and this pedal is loud. Which means that at some point you might run into a live console or a recording desk that just doesn't have the headroom for it. At least on my ISA1 I had to set the gain to the lowest setting to not distort the converters inside my audio interface as well. These tones might not be the best choice for your all-around tone, since you lose a lot of bass and they need a lot more post-processing to sound really that good in a mix. And also, since you're hammering on the output, there's nowhere to go but down on any of these settings. You can't really increase your volume at this point or bring out more treble or more bass, because those are already so loud that they're getting distorted. So bringing in more treble or bass will just result in more distortion and not treble or bass. I think these tones might work as a solo tone or a tone for your breakdown or something like that. So would I buy this pedal? Currently not. I don't have a project right now that could use these kind of tones, and especially the distortion side really lacks some critical variety for me. It pretty much just does the dUg tone and then some decent clank tones. The normal channel also quite doesn't do it for me, because to get a tone that I prefer from it, I really need to boost the treble up quite a lot, almost to the maximum. And I fear that if I were to use a string set with a little bit less highs than the stainless steel set I'm currently using for the bass, I might not be able to get there. But that's really just down to your personal preference. If you like the tones you heard on this video, you might really like the pedal as well. Playing through these tones and playing around with the DP3X actually feels really nice. And all of the songs you heard on this video, with the exception of the intro track, were something that just playing around and dialing in some tones with the DP3X inspired me to write. And that to me speaks loads about the quality of this pedal. Inspiration isn't just something that you can pull out from thin air. If you find a piece of gear that inspires you, buy it and stick with it until it doesn't inspire you anymore. I am quite disappointed that I couldn't find settings that would work on both channels of the pedal, which to me seriously reduces the capabilities of this unit. I'd love to have at least a second high EQ control for the mix channel, because that would just really make it easier to balance out the tones from both channels. This pedal also exists at a highly contested price point. At the time of filming, the DP3X sells at Thomann for a bit over 400 euros. At the same price point you also have all of the Darkless Ultra series pedals, you have the Orange Bass Butler, you have the Walrus Audio Badwater preamp, you have the EBS Micro Bass 3 and also the upcoming Revolt bass. My point here is that at this price point for a single pedal, you really have to bring your A game. And currently, to me, the best thing about this pedal is that it's extremely small. There are good sounds in there, but the most unique thing about this pedal is frustratingly one-dimensional. It really falls into the worst pitfall of a signature unit, and that is that it really sounds like dUg, but it doesn't do much else. As it is, I'll have to give this pedal a 7.5 by 9 points. It sounds good, but the variety just isn't there. Have you tried any of the Tech21 Signature Series units or any of the flyrig units? Let me know in the comments, and also let me know how you're using those. Thank you so much for watching. I really like talking about bass gear and interesting gear in general. If you're like me, I think you'll be satisfied with my future videos as well. So maybe subscribe, it's over there. You can also follow me on Instagram, that's here, where I'll occasionally post some behind the scenes content, dumb memes, and all that stuff. Take care, and I'll see you later.